Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and we're back to the solo mode of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. So last time we did the Rika Fairy Descends, barely even cared about the story, frankly, and it seemed like I wasn't the only one in that case because there really was just no story to be had in that solo mode. So let's see if we get another short one with the Wicked Dragon of the Hidden City. There is a gate here, but weirdly not a gate here, not a gate here, not a gate here. There was a gate here, which these gates used to indicate that it would unlock more story. I don't know if it really is working out that way nowadays, though. Land of Tinyi is the last story as it is sorted at the moment. Whoops. I guess the slight mistake there was that I had this game running for 12 hours as I slept, and apparently it decided it needed to connect back to the servers, and if you just leave the game running and doing nothing, you can't get back to it wants to reboot, I guess. I would say Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, while not terrible about disconnects from the servers, is not particularly great. So we're going to the Subterra Behemoth, terrorizing those who live in the Hidden City, all known of its legends, and only those able to escape from it can survive long in this world. So that does potentially seem like there might be some more narrative here, but this is just your basic solo experience again, where you get a story, a practice, one duel, and then an end of the story, then a wrap up of the story, or and then if you unlock this, you get a more difficult duel and a more difficult duel. If anything, it kind of feels like they're trying to burn out the secondary currency, but I don't think they really are. I think they're just going to constantly, in solo mode, give you more of that secondary currency, or just about as much as you need, always. So it looks like the Hidden City is slightly weirdly designed, circular with a lot of crevices around the outer outskirts. Looks like almost stone buildings, and instead of actual buildings. I was still getting this weird thing since day one. There's always been this, what I assume is some kind of content ID tracker mark, some kind of watermark with pixels being slightly off. I couldn't imagine it's actually just like bad visual programming. If anything, I might think that it was like supposed to be overscan compatible closed captions, but that makes no sense at all on a PC game. And there aren't. Maybe on Nintendo Switch you can play Master Duel. I think you can, but I don't know if Master Duel is even available on the PlayStation and the Xbox consoles, so it wouldn't plug into a TV anyways. Plus, there's no voice acting. Let's just get to that point. There's no voice acting in this game. So if this was some poorly programmed closed caption signal that we weren't supposed to be seeing, it wouldn't stay consistent, first of all, but there would have to be voice acting. The Hidden City, a subterranean world and a capital where many intellectual races cohabitate. There's no sun, no sky here, yet there's an abundance of nature. The grace of nature cannot be taken for granted, as it is an important part of life for the inhabitants. For example, the moss that covers the walls of the large cave, weirdly, not really seeing moss covering these giant wall sections. I am seeing a volcano, which I feel like a volcano would pour too much methane into the air and kill you, just suffocate you. Like underwater volcanoes maybe could solve that problem, and give you geothermal energy, certainly. Although, when you are proposing this idea of a secret society, underground society, you have to think about how would that society have evolved in the past before they had technology, unless the idea is that this society did live on the surface where it would be much easier to live of a planet, and then moved underground later on as they're with advanced technology. Otherwise, you'd have to assume that some caveman-like species was eating moss off the walls and living in the cave. So the moss glows at regular intervals, illuminating the darkness. The light emulates day and nighttime, just like the sun that gives plants and animals the power to live. Of course, also, these stories are just being very quickly written and not going to go into huge details. So simplistic solutions such as there is no sun or there's no day or night, but yes, there is, because we have glowing moss. No one knows the origin of the world or how this world became to be what it is. Very easy to sentence to write, so you don't have to explain any of the backstory. So we're definitely not doing hard sci-fi here. We're doing very simplistic sci-fi, which is fine, because like this story would have to be the main story of Yu-Gi-Oh! For you to bother to put that much attention into writing the backstory and the hard sci-fi type elements. And the main story of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime in particular does go into a lot more details over many seasons, but even at that, it is still basically there was magical creatures and then there was magic, and with magic they captured the magical creatures into giant stone predecessors to Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards, and then in the present day the magic resurfaced and they started to make Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards based on the magical creatures trapped in the magical stone tablets. There is no further explanation as far as the different types of cards. If anything, you pretty much assume that things like the Blue Eyes White Dragon and the Dark Magician were one of maybe a dozen magical creatures that were actually captured in stone tablets in the past, and then the vast majority of the other 10,000 cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Were made up by either Pegasus originally or Kaiba Corp later on. Just whole cloth made up from imagination, which might be a better backstory idea anyways, to say that people can just imagine any character and make a Yu-Gi-Oh! Card and it'll be magically summoned through holograms. Moving on with the story, I'm not really focusing on it. Again, I'm losing more and more interest in following these stories and only really doing these elements out of just kind of an urge to get a few more gems and a few more rewards. The metropolis is a culmination of nature's bounty and the will of various species to coexist with one another. In this underground world where many call home, there are beings feared as calamities from ancient time, living legends that stand at the top of all life in the underground. The wicked 8 dragons, called the Subterror, as it's supposed to be a pun on subterranean, and of course it would be in Japanese originally, I suspect so. They are stretching to find an English equivalent of a pun. Subterror Behemoth. So everything was fine and dandy with the city until they mentioned the giant 8 dragons. Yeah, and I think societies would probably collapse in distress pretty quickly if they were constantly being attacked by even one giant monster like a dragon. But, you know, in the real world we have ever-increasing climate change globally and pollution ever-increasing, take your pick, global upheaval, and people don't... society still manages to just adapt and go forward, at least it has so far. So maybe if in the real world one day we had a giant dragon attacking us, we would eventually just get used to it. To the inhabitants of the subterranean, surviving and effectively hiding from these so-called calamities was a higher priority than finding food to eat. As long as the calamities exist, finding a safe haven is a difficult undertaking. And the story just kind of ends there. You can definitely see how there's three conflicting desires in that narrative. They want to tell you about the good guys and an interesting city as just laying some foundation of storytelling. So they're talking about the civilizations working together and coexisting and then they want to tell you about some cool powerful monsters. So they're talking about the 8 dragons, which kind of conflicts with everything being at peace and everybody, the good guys, all working together. And then they also want to talk specifically just about the city and how a city could exist there as a secondary focus, which takes away from talking about either the good guys as the citizens or the bad guys as the dragons. And there's just not enough words used to explain all that. It's just not going to really happen. Meanwhile, this is all just a very rough story around at most 40 cards. So, a gimmick that at most 40 cards somewhat synergize around, but in reality it's probably closer to 5 cards truly were made to synergize with it. Once again, we're given 2 pictures that mean nothing to me. It seems like the idea is you can place maybe a trap card face down in the monster zone in defense mode, which would make no sense. So that's probably not the case. So I'd have to assume you can place a monster face down and then discard or banish from the graveyard a trap. And then in the second one, it seems like you can summon a high level monster without tributing, would be my guess. So that's my guess from these pictures, which I'm only guessing to highlight how wrong I'm probably going to be. High level Subterror Behemoth monsters can be special summoned from your hand when a face up monster on your field has been flipped face down. Nothing here indicates that it was face up originally. And more than it, this means to me more than it would have just been summoned face down. And there are no other face up monsters on the field. Many Subterror cards have effects that flip cards, or are monsters that have effects that trigger when they are flipped. Use card flipping to draw out your card's potential. Okay. I guess I get the general idea so far. This is a scripted experience, so they're going to more than likely just script similar actions. These scripted experiences, though, since they're scripted, are pretty poorly written in that you aren't really ever explained as to what your opponent is doing, and your opponent never does anything particularly interesting. So they'll just put a face down card to be a barrier, and we need to do 3,000 damage, and then they'll tell you step by step what to do, so you really don't have to learn anything. Special summon Subterror Behemoth Umastrix and win the duel during this turn. Activate the Hidden City. This effect will allow you to add Subterror Nemesis Warrior to your hand from the deck. First step. Activate a field spell. Click yes, and select that one card out of a very long list of other cards. Which my default temptation whenever I can add something to the hand or summon it is to pick the biggest card, a level 8 card or level 7 card, something like that. Inherently, that isn't always the best strategy, but it stops me from having to potentially read all the cards and all of their effects. This triangle going downward here still feels very odd. It feels like it's just pointing down to this lava spot when that's not really what it's doing. It's just telling me to click to go forward. Feels like there should just be an OK button in here, like there confirm and OK buttons elsewise. It's an inconsistent user interface. Subterror Nemesis Warrior. Let's just stop saying Subterror since I'm stumbling over that word. Nemesis Warrior has the effect where you can send a Subterror monster to the deck, from the deck to the graveyard, and special summon that Subterror monster from the graveyard. However, in order to put that effect to use, Subterror Nemesis Warrior must tribute monsters on your field, including itself. And the sums of the levels of the tributed monsters must be more than the Subterror monster that has been sent to the graveyard from your deck. Since you will be special summoning a level 7 Behemoth Umastrix, you should special summon Gillosaurus from your hand and then prepare to use the effect of Subterror Nemesis Warrior. Let's try that. So this can special summon. This will allow your opponent to special summon one monster from their graveyard. They don't have anything in their graveyard. Doesn't probably matter what sides it's on. But you can see a usage ratio on that card now that they've updated the interface, and see that these cards are not played in winning decks at all. At least that card isn't. Try to summon Nemesis Warrior. It says try to summon it. Why not just summon it? 007%. Now that we have 7 stars on the field, activate Nemesis Warrior and special summon Umastrix in face down defense position. Send it from the deck to the graveyard and tribute the 2 monsters on the field. So activate this effect, send this to the graveyard, and then we select this card, and then sets face down. Could be face up defense mode, which I will say, the idea of being up face up defense mode doesn't really do much for Yu-Gi-Oh! So it kind of would make some sense if cards were always face down in defense mode. There is always this problem that you can't put any pictures or information on the backs of cards because the information wants to be hidden. But yeah, I would like to see in digital games a possibility of not doing that, of being able to potentially have something have a defense health without revealing any other information when it's face down. I guess at some level what you could do is you could, and this would probably be fairly revolutionary as far as card games go. They've had games where the cards are somewhat see-through and you can potentially figure out information or show information that way, but if you had defense cards and attack or monster cards, and if you were to say, I'm going to put a defense card on top of a face down card to give it a different defense, that could potentially work, where you would stack 2 cards on top of each other. Now, stacking 2 cards on top of each other potentially leads to cheating in real world play, where you could try and swap out cards or cheat in some way, but whatever. That's not really a concern. So I'm supposed to be playing here. Now activate the other effect of the Hidden City. The main problem, I would say, is more just a case that the when something is in face-up defense mode, that really doesn't ever activate an effect. I can't think of a single card that anybody plays that says, when this creature is at face-up defense mode, he has extra attack, he has extra defense. Some of them have an ability where they can attack from face-up defense mode as a gimmick. But feels like when something should be face-up, it should always be in attack mode. And it almost always is in Yu-Gi-Oh! With this effect, you may flip all Subterra monsters on your field to face defense to face up. Okay, face up. See, they're saying face up attack position here. So I click this, and again, you could have gone face up defense mode. By flipping it, you activate the effect of it that banishes one monster from your opponent's field and also triggers the effect of Nemesis Warrior, which will special summon itself from the graveyard. Now activate each effect and resolve them. So click yes here and banish that, and click yes here. And generally, I don't even bother to read what the prompts are, and I just click yes when you ask those, and I'd say at least 85% of the time that is your best option to do something versus not doing it. Now, weirdly, I could special summon something, but it's not going to let me. And now it's just good old-fashioned attack and win. No more tricks there. So yeah, I talked way too much and that took way too long to effectively just do a trick to summon a character and then flip him and summon another character and attack and win. Let's see how well learning those two tricks really is going to help me. We're going to get this trap card, but if we win with the loner deck, and this trap card if we win with the pre-built custom deck, my deck. Pause here and read this if you need the hints as to what your opponent's going to do and what strategies I'm supposed to do. Otherwise, I'm just going to go in fully blind. Although that's probably a mistake. And I will fully admit, if I actually read the description there, it probably would give me a very good hint as to what strategies to play. You can see your opponent is playing BMLs and the Hidden City also, which, if anything, that is like the most boring way to play a Yu-Gi-Oh game, is to potentially have two decks that are exactly the same. So I would say maybe there is even a trick to that that might make some sense. I'm basically doing the exact same strategy that I did before right now. Exact same actions, and I don't know if that's just because I got lucky or what. In a lot of ways, it would make sense to have it where if one person plays a card, it destroys the second copy of that card anywhere on the field, so that there could only be one Nemesis Warrior or one field spell. There used to, I think very early in Yu-Gi-Oh! Be a case that you could only have one field spell on the field at a time. But even like duplicate monsters, that could severely affect the meta in a positive way for newer players and players that haven't spent just massive amounts of money. What was the special summon options here? I don't think very many of these are good options. If anything, it seems like all these extra cards are only in here to be discarded so we can draw more cards. And then bringing this guy back. Would require somebody to be in the graveyard, so we can't activate that. And so I don't think there is a reason to do anything different. So far, with the exception of playing these 3 trap cards, which I have no idea what they are, I've just done the exact same thing. He just has 8,000 health now instead of 3,000. Target one monster in the graveyard, special summon it. Activate one of these effects also. That set this card face down instead of sending it to the graveyard. Suppose I was supposed to flip this face down. It would have made sense to flip it face down. Okay. Activate effect. Do nothing else. Activate this effect. Send that to the graveyard, I guess. This card used even less often. Put that in face down position. Special summon that. And face down position. The only other thing would be to try to get this character back. Now, when this flips, change all other face-up monsters on the field to face down. We don't care about that. When this flips, I don't think anything happens. When this flips, I don't think anything happens. So let's then go ahead and pay 2,000 life points and put that in face down position. Then activate this. This is another very convoluted strategy where we're filling out our entire monster field here. Let's go ahead and change this to face up attack position. And not activate its effect. And then really the only other thing we could do is find something with decent attacks. Would be to do something like this, but then I'd have to sacrifice one of those 2 characters. This is a fiend, this is a spellcaster. Can we summon anything to Earth to flip monsters? Guess Two monsters with different names. Okay. But no, I still can't sacrifice any face down monsters. So I can't special summon anything. Nor do I really need to. Just attack. But what's not really being shown in these easy battles, though, is that single-minded idea, that one concept of summoning something face down, then flipping it. If somebody has a strategy that counters any of those actions, or just stops effect monsters' effects in general, it's going to totally crash your plans of succeeding. So we have enough to go ahead and unlock this gate, so let's just go ahead and jump into the next loner game and not look at the story until the end, which I have to assume the story is going to be fairly boring. So the next step here, this should be slightly different or slightly more difficult to win. Again, I suspect that all of these extra cards are only for throwing in this spot. We have Subterror monsters. So what are we going for? I think this spell card is fine to just activate now. Okay, this seems crazy. Let's go ahead and set these. I'm trying to eliminate possibilities on this. So do this. And then we have a fairy effect monster style that is Earth, I think. Which means I can then banish this, and I hope that banishing this makes sense. Oh well, I was hoping that that would have summoned something more. Let's go ahead and activate this effect. I don't think it's actually going to do anything other than just protect my cards. Now, I was going first this turn anyway, so I wouldn't have been able to attack. So it's not a big deal. Let's just not activate either of those traps, since neither one of them really need to be activated. That's just gonna work for me. Seems to me like all the Subterror cards are not as plentiful in this deck. Activate this effect, put this face down, and see what happens there. Field spell. This just gives me a field spell, so I should have been doing that earlier. apparently that let me summon Miz, which is crazy. Half your life points to negate a card? That doesn't seem necessary. Why is my life points being affected so much in these traps? I've never seen a deck that had the idea. Yeah, I've never seen a deck that was actually built around this idea where you could lower your health down to like 1 health point, and then that would make you do way more damage to your opponents. There is like a god card, Egyptian god card, so they're too difficult to play. I think that's something like that, but not much. Okay, well, is this a Subterror monster? Yes, so let's activate this and not chain it with this. Flip this in face up defense mode. Which I guess that's as much as I can do, so attack here. This is going to flip him. Let's go ahead and activate this effect. Put this in face down defense mode. Which by flipping it face down somehow gave this more health. More attack. He seems to be directly affected by how many other face-up Subterror monsters you have. Let's go ahead and destroy this monster, I guess. With this trap. Try and destroy this monster, I guess. Okay. Attempt number 2. Oh, that was a lot of work to do very little. We don't want to activate that effect yet, so we'll end the turn. Really didn't do a lot of damage there. One of the things I think that would potentially just speed up these scenarios is if they did just have the players starting with half as much health. Like 15-minute games are not necessary. And there's still just so much randomness just based on the cards you draw that one person may have a very good experience while other people may not have anywhere as good of an experience. And that is definitely the experience I have had, certainly, is that there's been times when I've done these battles and they've been really difficult just at random, and then the next challenge, the next attempt is actually just very easy. See how this works. I would assume that all these sub-terror cards that we're playing... Oh no, I don't want to do that. Can I cancel this? Nope, I've already activated. Like, all these sub-terror decks that we're playing are representing characters that are the bad guys. We really aren't seeing any good guys being depicted, or even any protagonist or antagonist characters. Send this to the graveyard. Go ahead and flip, activate. Really just trying to figure this out. Flip this. So none of this is quite right. Attack here with this, and then you lose even more attack points. And then once again I've screwed up here. Like, I honestly should have won by now, but I keep flipping things face down, but I shouldn't be flipping face down. Which definitely makes a less common issue, certainly, where you're just running in circles activating effects and you just don't really understand the effects and understand what you're supposed to actually be doing. So that got me a card back. This would have just gotten me 2 legacy packs. So one last attempt here. Doing it with my custom deck would be 200 gems. Doing it with the loner deck will do a icon. I would assume Subterra monsters are all Earth monsters, so there might very well be some extra synergy around an Earth deck. But unlike Magic the Gathering, where you effectively start by saying you're playing a red-blue deck, nobody starts by saying they're playing an Earth deck or an Air deck or a Fire deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! You would describe your decks much more appropriately based on types of cards. For example, my custom deck, Zodiac Tri-Brigade, has Zodiac cards and Tri-Brigade cards in it. I couldn't for the life of you, even after playing with it for a very long time, tell you if it was mostly Earth creatures or air creatures or whatever. In fact, almost always I feel like it was a mistake for them to have those markers of being Earth, Air, Fire when every other monster also has a description of being like beast, winged beast, things like that. Okay. Let's see, what are we trying to do? Apparently doing Vernisif cards now. We have 2 cards here that we can discard by activating an effect. Let's discard that. And then take that. Then special summon that. That's what I was thinking. So now this is technically a Vernisif card. So now my cards can't be attacked by card effects. So let's see if we could double this up and activate that too. Is there really anything here to special summon? Well, I could get Blackluster Soldier if necessary. Meanwhile, we can put this in face down defense position. This could flip this to attack position, but I don't see a reason to do that, so let's just go here. Destroy the big one. Crotch fingers on the small one. Didn't work. Took some damage. Not really a big deal. And guess I can't really do anything else, so in the turn. Now, remember, this card only protects them from using card effects. It doesn't protect the cards from being directly attacked. And he then could use the card effect. Okay. Let's activate this. Put it in face down position. Activate this. Put it in face up attack position. Okay. That works. If you control 5 or more Earth monsters. Whoops. So I'm stumbling through this, trying to figure out the best cards to potentially have on the field. Again, just trying to summon as many things as possible. So it'd banish a card if I flipped it. So we've got 5,000 damage, and if I could just flip this one card, I could win in this turn. But I don't think I can pull that off, so let's just see what happens here. You see, we're going to be done effectively with ever playing any of these cards, so having kind of paid attention to the win percentage for people who do play these cards, Sub-Terror cards obviously are just not really doable as a card concept. Seriously? That was a mistake. That was not what I was trying to do. Okay, so that's pretty much all I can do, and that's more than enough to win. But we didn't get to really play around with the idea of having 5 earth monsters on the field, which was the strategy here, and giving all of my monsters plus 1,000 attack. 5 earth monsters would be difficult. We'd need to probably want to special summon an earth monster from here and put it in the special summon section. It's not in the turn and mess up. I'll say in the last recording I also went through the story so fast that I chose to just show off the Zodiac Tri-Brigade pre-built deck to win all of these other 3 victories. In this case we're going a little longer, so I'm not going to bother to show that off again. But I will say it would be super easy. Like, it's going to take me exactly 1 attempt for each of 3 of these to get them to the completed stage and have victories for both the loner and the my deck. And since there are daily quests around playing solo mode, it makes a lot of sense to not do that until I have a new daily quest to play 3 games in solo mode. So let's finish the story, which, again, just not much there. These monsters, we summoned a bunch of them. They, I guess, are all supposed to be like underground I guess that the idea is that they're underground dragon type monsters. It seems to me like there's possibly an earth one, possibly two water ones, or the same water one is being shown twice here. And then a dark, and then a maybe light, and then a fire. Wouldn't be surprised if one of these blue is supposed to be air, and one of these is supposed to be water. But if you have earth, fire, air, and water, and then a light, or what I think they call divine or deity in Yu-Gi-Oh, and a dark, which is I think just called dark, you're still only getting the 7. So one of these characters has to be duplicate as far as the different types of elements that they're based on to get to 8. The Subterror Behemoth terrorizes those who live in the subterranean world. Many tales of these beasts have been told amongst the tribes that live there. Caves reinforced with hard bedrock can be found throughout the subterranean world. Much of its natural terrain, but parts of it have been bored by those who lived in this world. The feared being for those pioneers. I think that's supposed to be the fear being for those pioneers hides in places like rock, faces, and cliffs. The subterranean behemoth Stalagmo, which I don't think we saw Stalagmo. I guess he's supposed to be like a stalactite. Its body looks like it's made out of stone, and black mucus flows out of it from areas that appear to be joints. Once the liquid gets hold of your body, there's no way to evade its attack. According to those who've seen Stalagmo, they were horrified by how agile the red-eyed chunk of rock can be. In this limited world, there are many other dragons that call the place their habitat. The subterranean behemoth Voltature. This is all dialogue and description that would have been way better at the beginning, so I actually would care about the cards I was playing. It's a dragon that can create thunder clouds inside the caves. This would also have flying creatures such as birds. This world also has flying creatures such as birds and flying dragons. But the Voltalure has a distinctly different ecology from them. They have wings, but they don't flap them. Rather, they fly freely within the subterranean as if floating through the air. Its body is always enveloped in electricity, and anybody that approaches will be paralyzed or worse, killed. The sky is not the only dangerous place. Even deep underground, dragons lurk, digging through the ground with horns and claws as the Subterror Behemoth Umastrix. Although its eyesight is poor, it can use its 5 pairs of whiskers to feel around. Okay. It is able to sense any hostile beings in its surrounding and hunt it down with pestilence. It definitely feels like it would make more sense to have this at the very beginning of this solo experience, explaining the characters we actually care about, and just get rid of the world building concept at all. In all the solo stories, you could just say, here's some creatures we want to tell you about in this nebulous world. We don't really need to explain the world much otherwise. Because even in some of the longest running, most detailed descriptions in the solo stories, mostly the world key solo stories, I think is what it was called, where there's been 3 separate solo stories to continue that narrative. Even in that, they do a very poor job describing the world and doing world building anyways, and you just don't need world building for a collectible card game. You're not going to show a picture of a card that is just the world of places or the city. The hidden city is going to be a field spell at best, so you barely should mention it whereas the character creature cards are way more important. The Umastrix leaves behind a trail of abnormal sinkholes and ridges. Villages have been annihilated from being in the path of the wicked dragon. There are also volcanoes in this subterranean world. See, they're having to like rewrite in descriptions to explain things that they didn't even establish. Volcanic ash paints the area gray, and anything in lava, the lava touches it burns. In the volcanoes, there is a chance that Subterror Behemoth Ultra Maphus might lurk within. The Ultra Maphus is a walking volcano that envelops hot magma. However, it is not always active and may be dormant for certain periods. The ecology of this dragon and natural volcanic activity cannot be linked together. But for the tribes that live near volcanoes, the correlation is obvious. Volcanic eruptions are a sign that Ultra Maphus is awakening, they claim. So there's no narrative in that story part either. And if I didn't have a surplus of this Earth orbs, I would have had to have looked at that before I did these two battles, which would have maybe made me care a little bit more about these battles, but probably not by much. And I don't think there's been a single solo story where we've had an actual resolution of anything, or much of a resolution. No, there's been a couple that have actually resolved things, but a lot of them haven't. It really should be like beginning, middle, end as far as the narrative goes, and instead you get world building backstory done poorly, character building done poorly, and then whatever this is going to be as potentially a wrap up. And for just powering through the narrative and the cutscenes, they're going to get this card. Even in the subterranean world, water is an important resource. It provides sustenance to the flora and fauna of the underground. So it feels like this is just going to introduce yet another dragon they forgot to mention. One of the sources of said water is a huge underground lake. There lives the lord of the lake named Subterror Behemoth Stagorakin. Obviously I'm not really pronouncing these correct. When it lurks in the lake bed, it is difficult even for aquatic characters to see through its camouflage. Its motion, its four horns emit red light. It only takes an instant to devour its prey. Because the lake is a habitat, it is seemingly easy to spot, but it is also it is a highly elusive dragon. The bottom of the lake has a waterway that leads to another hidden area in the lake. There are many myths about the lake, but no one has been able to uncover them. The underworld has a range of climates. One of that is an ice field. The icy field is a stronghold for another dragon. It is the ice dragon Subterror Behemoth Phosphor Glacier. Its entire body is covered with ice. The torso has a glowing sphere that glows as if it's embodied the radiance of life. Fascinated by its glorious appearance, many have lost their lives getting too close to it. The sentient race that built the city built graves and mourned the dead. In a world of danger, will death give us peace we long for? Subterror Behemoth Dragosauri makes the living ask such questions. Even in death, the wicked dragon continues to move as a skeleton, so this is a skeleton dragon, or bone dragon. According to one legend, it is said that Dragosauri eats the souls of the dead. Occasionally its body would faintly glow red with the lament of a soul it consumed. So yeah, that's a dark card or fiend card. Finally, there's a legendary dragon that sits atop the previous 7. The Wicked Dragon King, Sub-Terror Behemoth Spittlgeist. Which, I would say this is something that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is pretty bad about, is that when they have one card that is obviously better than the other cards in the series, they don't name it anything different. So it's basically up to you to know which card is the best card or the final card that you would want to summon in a series of summons. You'll have to look at the number of stars or just generally try to figure it out. They painted themselves kind of in the corner by introducing Egyptian god cards and saying those are the best cards ever, and only having 3 Egyptian god cards, because then that makes a maximum to which all other cards must be inferior to. And that creates a more difficult power creep problem, because card games, despite the fact that people don't like the idea of power creep and cards just getting stronger and stronger, the characters actually do need the power creep a little bit, otherwise there's not going to be much of a reason to make new cards. So I would assume this might be a divine style card, a light card, but it doesn't visually look like a light card. Compared to the other dragons, there's no accurate description for the Wicked Dragon. One legend says, like an evil spirit full of darkness, the Dragon King rules this world. Another legend says the king prevents other dragons from expanding their territories. Others say the Wicked Dragon brings upon calamity to display their might to the king. Needless to say, the lore of the dragon is shrouded in mystery. The inhabitants of the underground live in fear every day, while hoping to one day escape these calamities. Although, they seem not to really have anywhere to go. Like, either they're trying to dig deeper, which doesn't seem like that would work, or they have to dig upward. They seem like they don't try to do that either. Since they're in caves and all these dragons seem to be very large, it would seem like you could have a collection of very small caves that you could run and hide through. But then maybe the dragons can just cut through caves and dig through them themselves very quickly and easily. Someday someone will stand up and defeat these calamities. I was thinking, as far as the narrative, it probably is better, if you're going to say there were 8 great dragons, to have at least one of them be wounded or defeated, so there is a slight hope amongst the citizens that it can be done. Even if it was like 10,000 years ago, one dragon was wounded or one dragon was hurt and had like a scar or something. But when you just make characters so overpowered that it seems like there's no chance that you could even hurt them, that doesn't establish the idea of any heroes in this narrative, which noticeably there are no heroes in this narrative, or any hope in the narrative. They live with a faint glimmer of hope that a hero will arrive one day. That's just exactly what I was just saying. Like, it's almost as if I knew that was going to happen, but I didn't. It's just basic storytelling, my understanding of what basic storytelling should be. So the gate is clear. Well, we found a new card pack, and maybe that is really what gates being clear nowadays are all about. It's just to find the card pack and give you an excuse to come waste some gems by purchasing cards. Is this particularly a good candidate to spend gems on, though? Not really. And you can see this is the 40 cards around the Sub-Terra idea. And we'll just keep an eye to see how many of these cards are Earth cards. I bet they are all Earth cards. Well, no. This isn't technically a Sub-Terra card. and it's a light card instead. It does kind of feel like there is an idea here where they really have more of an emphasis on creating monsters and enemy bad guy cards than they do creating anything that feels like a good guy card. There aren't a lot of hero cards. This is a fire genre character that maybe is a good guy, but maybe isn't. Then we have Hidden City, which technically looks like it's a water card. Why is a field spell a water genre, though? That doesn't really make a lot of sense. See, I could click related cards here if I wanted to, and it's going to show you even fewer cards than this deck was showing. And then, don't know what that is. When playing Yu-Gi-Oh, you can hover over this and it will tell you what the symbols are, because these are obviously Japanese symbols that they didn't bother to translate and now have just stayed that way. Visually, they stand out quite a bit, and it would make a lot of sense to rethink the layout of Yu-Gi-Oh quite a bit. First of all, you would get edgeless cards with the image going to the full edge, if not also fading behind the text, for a much more modern, better look to it. Magic does that for some cards and then charges more for cards that are like that, but never redid it for any of their old cards. But the star limit and the element, if you're going to keep the element idea, probably should be somewhere down here with the attack and defense concept, because I don't think this spot here is ever really used anyways. So that would give you more space for a bigger picture, and the picture is what you're mostly trying to show off, while you still have to convey the instructions on how a card actually plays, unless of course you want to put the instructions of how a card plays on a secondary card. If you could effectively have cards that were actually like pockets, and you would pull the description and all the attack and defense out of the side of the card and then slide it back in, and it was just a full picture cover to begin with, that would be nice. At a certain point though, that's probably way too expensive for cards that really only should cost a fraction of a penny to make. You could have visual character recognition and add some computers to it. A camera could look at the picture and then tell you all the information. That's effectively what the Yu-Gi-Oh anime is all about, is that you're shown a card that really is just a picture, because when they showed you the cards, and particularly in that first Yu-Gi-Oh anime series, they would just show you a card that had a picture. They hadn't even written the descriptions of what the cards did yet, but it would have been in Japanese, and so any English viewer would have not been able to read it, or it would have been censored out anyways, and just there would have been no text to show. But eventually, or very quickly, you get into the holograms and the computers showing the attack and defense when you summon a monster, or it just shows up on the screen showing the attack and defense. Where the actual card game doesn't work that way. Like either a camera to scan the images would be nice, or just slightly way more expensive would be to put NFC tags inside each card and have it scanned by a playmat or computer field. But that again is too expensive for cards. It's a shame you can't really see the percentage used when looking at these cards, because that would be the information that would be very, very helpful as far as the whether or not you would want to pick a card and play it in a deck. And because you don't have that kind of support, that just further pushes people to go online and just find a card deck that has been made by somebody else and use other people's advice and expertise in deck building. Being given 7,000 to 10,000 cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel just means that pick 40 of them and make a deck is not reasonable by any means, and that is very much the experience you get in Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. So yeah, I'm too low in gems and crystals really to justify buying a 10-pack of this, nor do I really care specifically about those cards. So with that, the only last thing to do would be to scroll down here and see if opening that gate unlocked anything new. I would say the answer to that is no. It does feel like there might be a sequel version to this story, though. And obviously I have 3 more to potentially do. Let's see. The last time we had like a continued story was this Legend of the Star Heroes, and that is 4 different segments that are all very, very long in comparison and tell a ton of narrative. But I think the thing with Legend of the Star Heroes is that Legend of the Star Heroes is a relatively new expansion in Yu-Gi-Oh! Talking about cards that were actually intended to be played by a bunch of people for a much longer time, where something like the Fairies Who Paint the Weather, I think, was a one and done gimmick that didn't catch on, and that I assume a lot of these are older card sets in general, like the Invincible Bee Troopers. Weirdly, you would think there would be something here around the Zodiac cards or the Tri-Brigade cards or Flowander or Terra Laments. Those are all the types of decks that are still being played at high ranked play. In fact, Zodiac Tri-Brigade arguably not even being played at high ranked play anymore. And we seemingly just haven't gotten to that yet. We're still catching up on old stuff. Anyways, that's going to be it for this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to support me further, there's some links down below in the description box. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.